The scripture I picked for this is one of the most beautiful sermons. The first sermon in Matthew that Jesus gave was the Sermon on the Mount. And one of my mentor friends, who's 92 right now, he celebrated his birthday last week. He had a sermon series called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes. They're to be your attitudes. Just the you's not in your in there, but they're to be your attitudes. The first one is Matthew 3, which, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And when we come to God poor in the spirit, that's the only way we can come. We can't come rich in the spirit because we're doing it our way. It has to be his way. Poor in the spirit, we know nothing. We think we know everything, we know nothing. This is a star-breathing God we pray to, that we're under, and he knows every hair in our head and every life of every sparrow. So, anyways, in my childhood, I'm 73 now, so I was born in 47, simple arithmetic. And I grew up in a God-fearing every Sunday throughout my childhood. I had perfect attendance many years, that little gold pin. Each year, the more years you were perfect attendance. And I don't think I had as many as my sister years because I was always fainting. Sometimes it worked, rarely, but sometimes it did. Like I said, we attended church. The first part of the service, we sang the first 3 songs, and then we were dismissed to Sunday school. And that's the way it was until we graduated from Sunday school around 13, 14. And we're to attend the regular services. Well, I kind of turned my head off, my springs off when I turned 14, because I enjoyed the stories of the Bible, and we were told them there were stories. 1950s, 55, 56. Change of correction. My brother and sister, who were born in 50 and 51 respectively, they got the myth and fables of the Old Testament idea, which was sad, because every word written in that book is from the mouth of God. Amen. So I received more of the stories and all about the prophets and all the kings and so on, and the stories of Jesus, and I knew them all, and I thought I knew everything. Why do I need to learn anything? Plus, this guy speaking in the pulpit when I was 14, because I had to sit there, he was talking something I didn't want to hear. It was drooling on and on and on, la da da. I enjoyed him during young youth services, but the church service was, we were the 4 or 5 guys in the back of the church. We were in our own little world, in our peer pressure business, and I enjoyed youth group. That was wonderful and so on, but it was all fun. And then I graduated from high school, went off to school, and I didn't have to go to church anymore. Wow, that's great. Freedom. So I didn't go. And my mother, she was the faithful one in the home, but I never ever saw her read a Bible. I never saw her pick one up. But she was the driving force to get us to church. My dad, he was there because of my mother. When my mother passed away in 1977, I talked to him one day on the phone in the 80s, and I said, I told him I went to church. He said, "You went to church?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't go to church." I said, "Well, you went to church for all my youth." He says, "Yeah, because your mother made me." It's understood that I go to church. And when I was home, my mother took me to church, and I faithfully went to church with her until I would join the Air Force. But I didn't have to go. I didn't have to go. I answered the Air Force, not her. So I was happy all through the Air Force that way, except I didn't like the idea we were in the war. But he said, when I married your mother, I went to church. I honored her. So, and that was it was an honor thing. We promised to love, honor, and cherish our wives. And he honored her by going to church. He was the head of the Board of Stewards, and they built big expansions on the church and so on. So he did his thing, but there was no faith in him. He had never believed in God, never believed in Jesus. He was just a dead man to him. So anyways, I tried. He lived to be 97, so God tried to reach him for a long time. Anyways, I praise there in heaven. I pray he had an epiphany, but we'll know when we get there. So like I said, church became irrelevant when I was a teenager. And when I went into college and so on, and university, I enjoyed my time there. I met my wife, my beautiful wife, and she had about the same amount of faith I had. We both knew Jesus was the Son of God. We both knew God was God, but he was that guy you put on the shelf and you bring him down when you need him. And we did our own life. We did our own thing. We enjoyed ourselves. We got married a year after we met, and 51 years ago today, not today, but this year, and we've had a very happy marriage. But we continued on our unbelief trail until my oldest son was about 7, and my younger son was 3 or 4, I think, and my daughter was just born. So I found myself more guilty on not showing my children religion, because that's what I call it. It's man-made, so it's religion. And my wife came from a religion background. I came from a religion background. And so I felt guilty, so the Spirit was working on me. I give him credit for that. He was working with me the whole time I was ignoring him. So kicking and screaming, he brought me to church. So we went 10 years, and we went through a very liberal minister there that he was quite the different guy. But anyways, some of the people know him here, and I won't say any more. But he made religion more irrelevant to me, because it was a social construct. It was something we talked about, the beauty of God's creation around us. And he was a flower child that was old. And we had their faith. And they asked her to do Sunday, because they didn't have anybody to do Sunday school. So they asked Karen, and Karen always says yes. She's a great girl that way. And she said yes, and then she looked at the curriculum the Sunday school had, and she says, I don't like this. There's no stories about that I learned in public school when the ministers would come to school at Matheson Public School and tell all the stories about Jesus and all the stories about the prophets and the kings and so on. I want those stories. So she told the minister that, and C. Sullivan said, sure, go ahead and do what you want. So he was happy. So it's because there's kids being looked after now, and she was faithful. She did that. So I went up with the rest of the kids up to the time junior congregation, and she left, and I sort of clicked my brain off and went into a daze, and I couldn't tell you his last sentence. I couldn't tell you anything he said during this 6 years I listened to him in the pew. My daughter said, my youngest daughter, and she was only like 7 when we left the church. Why? Was because she didn't have to she didn't have to watch us during church, because there was 4 or 5 teachers from our public school in the choir, which would look down and rule the next week. So we were good. Had to be. So I had to be at the front, and that's the way in my life. I've always been at the front of the church. Enjoyed it being there. Anyways, as Karen said, rabbit trails. Back to what you're talking about. Okay, so around 7 years, my kids started bucking the system. They don't want to go. They weren't enjoying Sunday school anymore, and they weren't being challenged in Sunday school after they left their mother's class. So we just quit. We just stopped going, and it was getting so liberal at that church. I even slept deeper, I think. But anyways, we left and we stopped. And for the next, that's been for 7 years. So that's 1984. We quit then, and then we just lollied along and dilly-dally. I was very successful in my career at St. Mary's Hospital and in home care, and I was enjoying my life. I was having pitfalls and downs and ups. And the ups, I was crediting myself because I did what was right in my eyes. And I blamed everybody else for my problems, for my faults and my errors. So in 1999, my errors caught up to me, and I wasn't doing that well in the branch, in my profession. So I asked for a transfer. They transferred me down to Arroyo, and I gleefully went, because I took 20 years to, I came up to the north, and I wanted to stay here 2 years, but leave, and I'm here 20 years later. 30 years later, and we finally left to go on south. So, but at that time, because I was being kind of persecuted at work and bumbling, I knew there's something missing in my life. And what was missing? I tried to fill it with a lot of things. I was heavily involved with Kinsman. I was heavily involved with donating my time to things, volunteering for things. But there was a big void, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Well, maybe it's God. So I went back. I was struggling to be there, but I knew I had to be there. I couldn't bring my wife. She didn't want to come with me. I think you came a couple of times, Annie, but that was about it. And she was off in theater and things like that, doing other things. And we so anyways, I'm rabbit trail again. So I was transferred down to Area, and I failed there too. They fired me. There's a man 53 years old fired in a profession where you can't do anything else other than collect welfare, and in a small profession where everybody knows each other. The enemies you make end up your bosses. So I had nowhere to go, and for 6 months I struggled. And Karen was praying for me all along, which she in and out of our life. I gave the 2-hour version of my testimony. I could tell you all the things that she prayed for. It came true. But anyways, God was there always for us, and He was on that shelf, but He came off nicely for us many, many times. So anyways, she prayed that I would find myself and find a way back into acute care. I was in home care, which is a chronic care treatment of people with lung disease. So to go back into the acute field of my profession was like going in another realm, because the equipment that I had used, not because St. Mary's had old equipment, but the equipment, it was state of the art when I left in '84, state of the art, but now it's all in the museum. We didn't even use them. And the theory that they were created for was gone. So I saw all this new stuff as I visited the hospitals in the north and so on, and talked to the ERTs in the hospitals. I would see all these things. I'm not going to be able to go back there. And anyways, my wife convinced me to send some applications in. So I sent 100 applications out. And I got 2 interviews. Well, why did I get 2 interviews? I'm really not trainable to be in a hospital because I've been out of acute care for 16 years. So what happened was that at the time, they would pick a couple of professions, pharmacy and respiratory therapy, to convince them to recertify in their profession every 5 years. Now this is an expensive thing to do, and when you work in fields in the hospital, you don't do everything. You don't work peds 1 minute and adults the next, and infants one, and so on. You are specialized in certain areas. Sorry, sir. And because I live up north, I use my hands. French influence. So I back to my words here. So I had tried my exam. It was an expensive proposition. I tried my exam, and for some reason I passed. Well, that was God's will, because when I looked at some of the questions, I said, I don't know anything about that, but I answered them anyways, and it was right. So I passed, but at the time, the graduates from the different schools in Ontario were leaving the province in droves, because if it cost them, say, $80,000 to get their degree in respiratory therapy, and then 5 years later they have to spend another 10 to get back into it again. So they left. They were leaving the province in droves. So, and our profession is 90% women. So as people were having their children, they weren't coming back. So there was a void in Ontario for therapists. So I got the job. Now they were very overjoyed. They got me. So they sent me to a critical care course for a $20,000 critical care course, in which I aced, and cardiac care course too, and I aced all that, and I did very well. And they usually give you 7 or 8 shifts to work with another therapist to get used to the hospital, get used to the way procedures happen in different hospitals, and so they gave me 20 shifts instead of 7, which was great. So that's another God thing. So anyways, by the time I had finished my, what they call, that period, I was to go on my own on the wards. Now, the scope of practice from 1984 to the year 2001 was night and day. I'd done a lot of the procedure. Previously, in 1984, I assisted doctors to do several procedures. Now, just RTs do it. The doctors order it, and they leave, and we do it. So, a lot of the procedures that I was expected to do, I used to do them assisting a physician. Now I have to do them by myself. So, I knew the theory, I knew the complications, I knew the dangers and so on, but a lot of them I hadn't done them. I'd seen them, I know the theory, I know how to do it, but I've never done them. When you have confidence, when you've done something, like driving a new car, first time you drive it, you're in trouble, second time you're better, third time you're better, and then by the 20th time you're driving. Anyways, the same in the field. So one of the ace thing that happened to me when I went back to the hospital, I realized the human body hadn't changed one iota since I left in 1984. All the equipment I could learn the technical part because I love technical stuff, especially physics. Anything that's figured out by math, I could do it. So I was confident with the equipment, but the actual practice was a problem. Well, one night I was called for an emergency in part of the hospital, and they called me down to do this emergency procedure on this patient to save his life, and I went whipping down there. I was running through my mind the procedure and so on, and it was a large hospital. It used to be a 1,000-bed hospital, but it's down to 300 now. So the wards are all over the hospital. So by the time I got there, I was winded and so on, and I went in the room. Here's 20 Italian visitors and relatives around this, crying, wailing over this patient that's fading, and the doctors and nurses are there, and they looked to me to do something. So I went in, and as I went in, I said, God, you got to help me. Well, I don't pray. I prayed probably 30 times in my life. And when I did pray, I'd say, bless Karen, bless my kids, bless other people, but I'm too much of a sinner. You won't answer my prayer. So I never prayed for myself. And so I finally, as I went in the room, I said, oh God, and I never in my life ever used the Lord's name in vain. That's one thing my Sunday school mind got me, is you never use the Lord's name in vain. And at that time I thought it was only swear words, right? But vain entails a whole different gamut of things when you take the Lord's name in vain. And I've learned since, but then I knew swearing was only used. So I said, oh God, and I wasn't a swear, you gotta help me. And so when I went in the room, it happened that I all of a sudden had a peace, and I had like an out of body experience where I was watching my hands do what I had to do, and the obstruction was relieved. He took a deep breath, color improved dramatically, and all the Italians were worshiping me like Paul, and he was in that city, but I can't remember where it was, and Paul and Silas, and the doctor was thanking me, the nurses were thanking me, and I walked out of there feeling pretty good. Look what I did. I did it. Wow. I'm amazed at myself. I'm amazed. My old pride comes out. Okay, so I'm hauling along the next couple of weeks, and I got another call for another emergency down in Emerge this time, and they asked me to come down and do this procedure because this guy's in dire straits. And I had never done the procedure. I helped another RT about 6 weeks before that do it, but I had never physically done the procedure. So I went down there, and I was trembling because this was probably more dangerous than the first one to the patient. So I went in, and as I went in the room, I said, oh God, you got to help me. Now, there wasn't 20 Italians there. There was just the patient and a nurse. And so I went in, and I asked God, I said, you got to help me this time, God. You got to help me again. So another same thing. I went in with a peace, took a deep breath, and I watched my hands do what I had to do, and the obstruction relieved, and he took a deep breath, and he was fine. And I said, wow, he is real. This God that they talk about is real. And he answers my prayer. My prayer. You know, we hear all these preachers on TV saying, yeah, he answers prayer. Well, he never answered mine because I never asked him for anything. How can he give you anything if you never ask? So that was a big lesson in my life. So, okay, now, remember I said in Timmins I was searching. Well, 4 people in the choir and about 6 in the audience. And one of them was the mentor's wife, and she was asleep. So that didn't draw me. I went 3 or 4 times there, tried to give him a chance, but he didn't speak to my soul. And same with another one. Another one was really good. It had a lot of really good music. So I liked that, but there's no message. Brown hair with a bald spot right there. And big long beard, and he had a voice of an angel. He could play that piano just like Jimmy Swaggart, and he could sing like Jimmy Swaggart. And he had the audience just hanging on every note he hit, and every note he hit, voice and piano. Anyways, every service, an elder would come out and say, we have this little card here that's in your pew. If you would like to fill it out and we'd like a record of you being here, and we also would like, if you'd like to see the minister or an elder, or have any questions in the office, please tick it off, and we'll put it in the offering plate, and we'll call you. I filled 5 of them out. I never got a call. I even called the office and said I'd like to volunteer for anything, because at that time I'd worked 4 days, day, and then I had 5 off. So sometimes I didn't go back home, so because Karen was off visiting her mother up north or whatever, I stayed down there, and they didn't call me. They said, oh, we'll call you back. No, they didn't call me. God didn't want me there, I don't think. He didn't, So we moved, we sold the house in Arroyo, and we both moved down to Hamilton. I was commuting back and forth about 6 months until we sold this house. And when we moved down, we moved all the boxes. My sons came down and helped me move in, moved all the boxes in the house. My wife says, let's go for a walk. I'm tired. I don't want to look at the box. We got there, and the church was full, packed. It was a big church, probably about 450. And everybody was standing and, waving their arms, singing to the praise group in the front, and the rock band also in the front too. And wow, I said, and the Carol came over and hugged us, and thank for sitting down. I said to Karen after we sat down, this is a Pentecostal congregation, and everywhere and so on. So I said, they're renting it. And so I was convinced of that all through the service. And the guy really talked well. The preacher, he really gave a great sermon. And so we went on a little tour of the church because it was a big church, and walking around, and we came to our turn to go through and talk to the minister. And he said, oh, hi, my name is Joe so-and-so, and what's your names? And you're new here? And you say, yeah, we're here now. So he said, we welcome you back, and we also have a Alpha course starting on Monday. Would you like to come? Well, I said yes, because I was thrilled by the service. This is the first time I've been thrilled about anything about God. So I said yes, but then I realized as we're leaving, Karen said, well, you're working tomorrow night. You're going to expect me to go? And I said yes. So she went, and I went to work. And I came home the next morning, and she says, I'm not going back. What happened? He says, well, they talk about things that I won't do. I don't do those things. I don't sin. Okay, so anyway, I'll go back. Let me go back next week or go with you. And anyway, so we went back the next week. And the Alpha course is a series of 10 lectures where a group of people, a couple of leaders meet with a number of students of the faith that know little about God, or a refresher that somebody wants to take this Alpha course. The first week is who's Jesus, what is the Bible. The next week they do what is prayer, what is the Holy Spirit, all those things. And you watch a 20-minute, you have a dinner. It's a potluck. I hate to say the word potluck, because luck is the root, Luke is the word, L-U-C is the root word for Lucifer, so it's pot blessing. So we have a pot blessing, and where we share a meal, and then we have a 20-minute video. We usually watch the video as we're eating, And after the video, we have a 20-minute question and answer period about that film. And I found it very rewarding, and my wife enjoyed that one too. So it was really great. I enjoyed it. And on the 5th week, we both asked Jesus to come into our life. And there was no lightning bolt. There was no, I woke up the next morning feeling wonderful, but I did feel the next morning that I didn't really enjoy a lot of things I did enjoy. So I used to be a real joker. I loved to tell jokes, especially dirty jokes. And I didn't have any in my head. I couldn't remember any. Like my mind I went like senior, way back, like from 53 to 93. I just didn't remember any of those jokes. And I got quieter because this is new in my life. And continuing. After the Alva course, the real thirst I had was to know more about God. Well, I attacked their library. They had a great library. And I almost read the library. I read everything. I couldn't get enough. And because I had 5 days off, and it was cold, read. So I didn't like TV. And all of a sudden I didn't like TV. I loved TV before. Every show I knew their actors, I knew everything. I didn't want to watch TV anymore. That's me. So I started reading, and we both read. We accumulated a huge library. Karen? Huge library. Covered a wall like that at the back. In front of the lunchroom there. And we just love those books. And so anyway, and then also I bought an iPod, which is like an iPhone, but you only could record podcasts and sermons on it. So I downloaded about 1,000 sermons on it. And I went back from I had always had a problem with my weight in my life. So I would walk 2 hours a day. I'd walk an hour in the morning, walk an hour in the evening. Each time I listened to a full hour sermon as I'm walking. So I was really into the word heavy because I wanted to be. I wasn't happy without it. If I had a problem, my battery went down when I'm walking. I walk fast to get home so I can charge the darn thing. So anyway, I was quite into the word. Now Bible studies were still a little bit scary to me because I couldn't read the Bible. I couldn't read the word. I'd pick it up and I'd look at it and it looked like Greek. What was? Because it was Old English. It was King James. And my grandmother had given me a beautiful leather-bound Bible with a gold zipper around. When you open it up, there's gold around the outside of the pages. And my name, John C. Cowley, was embossed in the front. But it was rarely ever open because I'd open it, no matter why I'd open it, and I'd see these ancient English words that meant nothing to me. Especially when you're trying to figure out the next sentence from the last sentence you didn't understand in the first place. So I would just fold it up and go back to reading my other books and listening to podcasts and listening to sermons. And one day we were invited to a Bible study. So it worked out with my schedule. It worked perfectly. Every time they had a Bible study, I had the night off. So we went, and we're sitting in this group of 15 people. The preacher's there, plus all these guys that I knew. Two are doctors, 2 are architects, 1 accountant, and a couple of nurses and so on. So these people are all highly educated. And the minister's reading all these questions off, and the answers would be popping, bang, 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 everybody's answer. And I'm lost. And he goes, okay, now in Matthew 8:17 it says, what does it say? So I go to Matthew 17, and then by the time I read halfway through it, the answer's already given. So I went to the doctor that the preacher was talking about during our break, our food, because one of the things that's good about faith people, they like to eat. So there's always goodies at these places. Back when I was in Carbland, I would eat a lot of carbs, and that's why I was 600 pounds. But anyways, so I asked him, I said, where are you getting all these answers? And he says, well, they're in the book. And I said, where? So he took out his Life Application Bible, and he says, see, you got scripture up here, and you've got all these notes at the bottom, and they're all applications of the scripture. I said, wow, how do I get one of those? He said, well, you go down to Costco. I'm not a member of Costco. I said, well, my wife is, and I'll tell her to go down there tomorrow and get her one. Get you one. So she went down, and the next night I had one in my hands. I opened it up, and I haven't stopped reading. It's amazing. Yeah, so it was in my language too, NIV, my language. So, now I still like the King James. I've learned to love it, but I don't use it as my first text because it's not my first language. It's like French is my first language. English is barely my first language. Now, the Bible did a lot of great things in my life. The number one thing it did was that the page where we, and the Bible, read the Bible through a year plan. I came to 2 Chronicles 28, verse 1 to 3, and I read, Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king of Judah, and he ruled from Jerusalem for 16 years. Ahaz was nothing like his ancestor David. Ahaz disobeyed the Lord and was as sinful as the kings of Israel. He made idols of the god Baal, and he made offerings in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burned his sons as an offering, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. In my Life Application Study Bible, the notes to those verses read like this. Imagine the monstrous evil of a religion that offers young children as sacrifices. God allowed the nation to be conquered in response to Ahaz's evil practices. Even today, the practice hasn't abated. The sacrifice of children to the harsh gods of convenience, economy, self-interest, and whim continues in these sterile medical facilities in numbers that would astound the wicked Ahaz. If we are to allow children to come up to Christ, we must first allow them to come into the world. Wow. As if God had knocked the wind right out of me. This was an oh my event in my life. Until that moment, I believed in the pro-choice movement and often openly scoffed at anti-abortionists. I had to immediately ask God for forgiveness. I developed a thirst to research the whole abortion debate. The more I read, the more pro-life I became. My heart continually grieves over the 110,000 babies in Canada sacrificed every year, and the 1.2 million babies in the United States per year, and the 70 million across the globe that are murdered each year throughout the world of the harsh gods of convenience, economy, self-interest, and whim.